Hey, and welcome to The Explainer. All right, let's talk about something we have all gone through. You're settled in, watching a movie, and you can't hear a word they're saying. So you crank the volume up, and then, bam, an explosion, a car chase, something loud happens, and it just about blows your speakers, and you're lunging for that remote control. It's a pain we all share. But behind that frustration, there's a really fascinating story about technology, and, thankfully, a brilliant solution that's finally calming things down in our living rooms. Let's get into it.
Seriously, why does this happen? You've probably asked yourself that a million times during that constant battle with your remote, right? Nudging the volume up for the quiet scenes, then frantically slamming it back down for the action. Well, today, we are going to get to the bottom of it.
And here's the great news. You're not imagining things. It's not your TV, it's not your ears. There are very real, technical reasons for this audio roller coaster. And the even better news? There's a global standard now. A clever, elegant fix that was designed to solve this problem for good. Okay, so here's how we're going to break it all down in this explainer. First, we'll look at the core of the problem, this idea of loudness versus peaks. Then we'll get into the solution, starting with a magic number called the -23 Luftarget and see how that helps to tame a wild movie mix. We'll look at the two main ways engineers get the job done, and finally, we'll wrap up with what this all means for you and me, just better sound for everyone.
All right, let's dive right in. To really get what's changed, we have to understand the fundamental difference between the old way of handling audio and this new, honestly, revolutionary approach. It's a total shift in thinking. So for decades, the industry used something called peak normalization. Think of it like a hard ceiling at a fixed height. Every single sound had to be mixed so that its absolute loudest moment, its peak, just kissed that ceiling but never broke through it. The problem? That tells you nothing about how loud it actually sounds to a human ear. Our hearing is based on the average loudness, not a split-second peak. So a quiet scene and a loud commercial could both hit the same peak, but the commercial would feel way, way louder. The new way, loudness normalization, flips that on its head. It says, forget the peaks. Let's make the average perceived loudness the same for everything. A movie, a TV show, a commercial, they all sound equally loud on average, and the peaks can just be what they need to be.
And listen, calling this a revolution isn't just me being dramatic. That's a direct quote from the people who created the standard, the European Broadcasting Union. This one simple change of focus effectively ends the loudness war, that ridiculous decades-long arms race where every show and every commercial was just trying to be louder than the last one. This is the peace treaty.
Okay, every good story needs a villain, right? Well, in our audio drama, the villain has a technical-sounding name, the loudness-to-dialogue ratio, or LDR for short. All it means is it's the gap between how loud the talking is and how loud everything else is, the music, the sound effects, the explosions. When that gap, that LDR, gets too big, the dialogue gets lost, and you're diving for the remote.
So how do you defeat a villain like the LDR? Well, you need a plan, a universal standard that everyone can agree to follow. And that brings us to the hero of our story, the -23 LUFS target. And here it is. This is the magic number, -23 LUFS. LUS just stands for loudness units relative to full scale, but you don't need to remember that. Just think of -23 as the universal target for average volume. When every broadcaster, every streaming service aims all their content at this exact same average level, those jarring jumps in volume from one show to another or from a show to an ad, they just vanish.
And this is a total game changer for sound designers and mixers. Remember that old peak method? That was like forcing them to work in a room with a really low, oppressive ceiling. But loudness normalization, it's like they're suddenly floating in zero gravity with nothing but open sky above them. They can finally create these incredibly rich, dynamic soundtracks with really quiet moments and huge, impactful peaks because they're not fighting to be the loudest anymore. They just have to aim for that -23 average.
Okay, next up, we have our target -23 LUFS. That's great. But movies. Movies are a special kind of beast. They're mixed for the huge sound systems in a theater. So before we can get them ready for our TVs, we have to deal with our old nemesis, the LDR. We have to tame that cinematic mix.
So check this out. This is a look at a typical movie mix, straight out of the theater. The overall loudness of the whole program is about -17 LUFS, which is way hotter than our target. But look at the dialogue. It's way down at -29. If you do the math, that's an LDR, a gap, of 12 loudness units. That massive gap right there is exactly why you can't hear what people are saying.
So the people who wrote the standard came up with another simple, brilliant rule. For TV and streaming, they said that the gap between the dialogue and everything else, the LDR, should be no more than 5 loudness units. Just 5. That's the golden rule. It keeps the speech clear and audible without totally squashing the movie's exciting dynamics.
And this is what that same mix looks like after a sound engineer has worked their magic. Using different tools, they bring the dialogue up and shrink that gap. So now, the overall program is at -21, the dialogue is at -26, and our LDR is a perfect 5. The mix has been officially tamed. It's now ready for the final step of the process.
Which brings us to our next section. The mix is tamed, the LDR is good. The last thing to do is hit that universal target. And it turns out there are 2 different ways to do this. 2 paths to the finish line, and each one is used for a very specific reason. But no matter which path you choose, the core idea is this simple 2-step fix. First, you adapt the mix. You get that LDR down to 5 or less. Second, you normalize. And this is the beautiful part. You just apply one clean volume adjustment to the whole thing to hit the final target. You're not remixing or squashing it with compression. It's just a simple static gain shift.
So here's where it gets really clever. Path 1 is the default. You take your tamed mix and you normalize the entire thing, the program loudness, to hit -23 LUFs. Easy. That's great for most streaming. But Path 2 is different. You use the dialogue as an anchor. You normalize the mix so that the dialogue loudness itself hits a specific target, like -24 LUFs. This actually makes the overall program a little louder, but it makes the speech level incredibly predictable. And why would you do that? Why anchor the dialogue? One word: commercials. Commercials are almost entirely dialogue. So if you can guarantee that the dialogue in the movie is at the exact same level as the dialogue in the ads, the jump between them becomes totally seamless. No more getting your eardrums blasted by a car commercial. It's a simple trip, but it makes a world of difference for the viewing experience. So let's bring this all home. After all this technical talk about LUFS and LDR and normalization paths, what's the big takeaway? It's that this whole smart system adds up to one simple thing: a better listening experience for everyone involved. For us, the viewers, it means we can finally relax. We can put the remote down. The volume is just comfortable and consistent. For the creators, the sound designers and artists, it means creative freedom. They can make things sound amazing without having to worry about being the loudest. And for the broadcasters and streamers, it's a reliable, universal playbook that just works, ensuring everything they put out there sounds professional and consistent. And looking at this timeline, you can really appreciate the journey. We went from the wild west of the loudness war to 2011, when the EBU R128 standard first introduced this revolutionary idea. Then, just in 2023, they added a supplement that specifically honed in on this cinematic content problem we've been talking about. So today, we're living in a world with a global, intelligent standard for making audio better for all of us.
When you step back and look at the whole system, the measurements, the standards, the simple best practices, it's just elegant. It's a solution that finally fixes one of the most common, persistent annoyances of modern media. And it's a win-win. It encourages higher quality, more dynamic art, and it gives the audience a much better experience. So the final question is this really the end of the loudness war? I think it's pretty safe to say that, at least for broadcast and streaming, peace has finally been declared.